Good evening, and you're very welcome to another episode of the Women's National League podcast here on FlyingWhistle.ie. I have fixed the audio. Apologies about that. There's always a one boo-boo technical-wise on the show every week. But Aaron, you're back again to join me for another week. It's been a busy weekend of action on and off the pitch. We're going to be talking all things Treaty United with their new CEO, brand new investment in the club. We'll be chatting to Ciara McCormack, former Republic of Ireland international, and of course a well-experienced professional through the game in Europe and in North America, has been with a Treaty this year. She's recently been appointed CEO of the club with a brand new investment from North America, and it's exciting times for everything in the Midwest. We'll be chatting to her in just a few moments. But Aaron, we'll also be getting into the Cup semi-finals at the weekend, and a couple of shocks maybe. I think Shells, they turned over Shamrock Rovers, having lost to them comfortably enough the week before. And then Athlone probably expectedly and probably deservedly ran out winners in the showgrounds yesterday evening or Saturday evening. Yeah, that was yesterday evening. I'm losing track of days here as well. Your thoughts on the game quickly before we go and have a chat with Ciara.
First of all, we have an important guest on, and Breifne's coming out with the baby face. The baby face is here to stay. Literally rock up to the podcast. No, Breifne's all shaved, ready to go. To be honest with you, we'll delve into the Shells game in more detail later. But night and day performance difference to last week. Lack of mistakes from Shelbourne compared to what they done last week. The Sligo game, I was probably one goal away. I said that Athlone would probably win a 3-0 last week, and wasn't wrong. A repeat of last year's cup final. We will delve into the league as well. Massive week for Peamount. All the haters are going really quiet this week, which I really like. Said on social media, it's probably the sweetest win for Peamount in terms of the league title because of the fact of what they've had to come through, what they've had to go through. James O'Callaghan, what can you say about the man? Like, he's been through massive adversity with what happened in 2021, then losing the league again last year, and then to do what he's done this year with that Peamount side, Brian O'Sullivan and Derek Masterson by his side. Like, what more can you say about that Peamount side? And look forward to really getting into the trenches of that later and chatting a bit more about that. But listen, exciting show ahead. Looking forward to chatting to Ciara. Treaty probably having their best season since probably it's probably fair to say it's the best season from a Limerick-based side in the National League ever. It's probably the best way to describe it. I think
they had a couple of decent seasons in the early days of Limerick FC, but I've been impressed by Treaty this year. I suppose it's as good a time as any to bring Ciara into the conversation. She joins us now from Limerick. Ciara, you're very, very welcome to the show, first of all.
Thanks for having me.
And congratulations on the news and the new appointment and the investment. I suppose before we get into the nuts and bolts of the investment, if anyone has any questions they want to put to Ciara who's listening in on the show this evening, you can just drop them in the comments below and we can bring them in and put them to her. She's going to be with us for about half an hour or so. We're going to just chat through all the news of the last week. But let's maybe start with the game yesterday, Ciara. Went to Cork. Disappointment maybe not to get a positive result from the game?
Yeah, I mean, I think Cork is definitely a game that, we should win. I think it's a game that we'd be disappointed not to win. So, but fair play, they played well. They kind of, again, when you have the sort of, just they were hungrier, got to balls quicker, better, put away their chance. So, yeah, well-deserved from their end to win the game for sure. And disappointing from our side.
Got to get your opinion on this, Ciara, because I've been overly critical in recent weeks, and Breifne will tell you that. When it comes to playing the game in Bishopstown, for someone, when you see other teams playing in the big stadiums, what's that like when you come to play in a game in the likes of Bishopstown? We've seen, just for the context for the listeners, the Irish under-17s were due to play in Turner's Cross the other day. The game had to be moved due to the pitch being unplayable as well. What's that like as a player when you're supposed to play in one ground, then you're moved to another ground?
Yeah, I mean, I think for players, like playing in Turner's Cross in Cork is, it's a great stadium and exciting. So yeah, I think for sure, and I think it's maybe a great thing now, like a luxury as women's players, where before you'd never get to play in the stadiums. But I think now, it's a disappointment if you're not playing in the stadium. So I'd say for sure it would have an effect.
Let's get back to the start of the season, obviously, because you're a well-traveled professional player. You did represent Ireland for, I think, 8 appearances early in last decade. We're not going to put an age on you. That's not fair. But you've been around the block. You've been in the professional game in Europe and North America. How do you end up in treaty, and how did that all come about?
I'm still asking myself that question. No, I'm just joking.
You're stuck there now. There's no getting away
It's
from it.
very random. It's absolutely random. Actually, I had a Facebook memory pop up of a year ago, and I just was laughing because it's definitely this time last year, none of this was really in the cards. So it's quite interesting how it's all come. But to make a very long story short, I had approached the League of Ireland about, I initially had an interest. Actually, my mom's from West Cork, and so I kind of had like this romantic idea of, you know, starting a women's team down in West Cork. But then once I spoke to the league, they were sort of saying that the League of Ireland was moving towards, you know, men's teams, women's teams, and an academy, you know, so it was like a full, you know, basically you couldn't just put a standalone team in anymore. And then they basically, you know, they said in Munster, you know, on the women's side that Treaty could use a hand, and Mary Curtin was actually one of my best friends playing for Ireland. So I just told them right away, oh, that's an easy one for me because Mary is one of my good friends. So reached out to Mary, and then anyways, try to make a long story short, yeah, I'm very passionate about, you know, just the whole soccer scene in Canada as well. And that women players, you know, when they're done university, they don't have an opportunity to continue playing. So I wanted to bring over some girls to an Irish club. And like I said, they Treaty, obviously with the season they had last year, needed a hand. And so that was how I kind of connected in with Treaty, kind of pitched the idea. Again, I have my own business, you know, running camps and clinics. And so I had said I'd fund it in terms of bringing the Canadians over. And I think they were very skeptical as to, like, you know, I think obviously it helped that I had Mary vouching for me and I'd played for Ireland, but I'm still obviously like a outsider and a North American. And, you know, they didn't even understand why would Canadians want to come over to the league. So trying to explain to them just the, you know, the way that it is in Canada, that we don't have a league to go after university. Anyway, so long story short, I ended up convincing them to, you know, just let me do it. And like I said, I think they just had a lot of skepticism, but I obviously delivered in what I said I would. And yeah, so that's kind of the story on how I got to Treaty. And then as a side thing, I'd said to them, listen, like, I haven't actually played proper 11v11 in like 4 years, but I'd probably be better than like the local, you know, 15-year-old or whatever that was playing for the team. So anyways, I'd said to Mary, like, not to say anything, like I just kind of come in with the Canadian girls and just see how my body was. And then the next thing I knew, they'd announced it, and even my parents didn't know that it was happening. And I had a whole bunch of messages, like very confused as to, like, you're 43 years old and like you're playing soccer in Limerick, like what's going on? So anyways, that's how that took it anyways to February.
That reminds me so much of Sylvia G playing for so long in the national league. But like, there was a lot of hype around when you'd come in, Ciara. Were you expecting that sort of thing, especially because you hadn't played in a couple of years, you know, and coming back into, had you expected that sort of hype to come around? Because I've seen loads of media outlets were writing about you coming back in. Had you expected any of that?
No, I was like dying laughing because one of the questions I got was like, you know, Ireland's qualified for the World Cup. Is this like an attempt to make the World Cup team? And I was like, no, I think my goal is to be like standing after 45 minutes. Like, I think not quite where we're at anymore. So yeah, I thought the whole thing was hilarious, to be honest. Cause like I said, I didn't even know what my body was going to be like coming in. So then the fact that there was even any talk that, anyways, yeah, I definitely was not expecting it. And yeah, it was pretty funny.
I think there's double figures of Canadian players in the league this year, spread across a couple of teams. There's a couple of girls in Athlone. Galway, I think Jamie Erickson's over there. There's a few in Treaty, a couple in Shells as well. Was that a concerted effort, or is that just kind of a symptom of there not being a professional league in Canada?
Yeah, so it's actually funny. Jamie and Christy Gray at Shells were both off of, like, they connected with me a couple of years ago, and I'd put them in touch. I had contacts at both places, so I'd put them in touch. And it's great to see them, both of them, like, really flourishing at those clubs. Yeah, that's the reality of it. There's nowhere to go in Canada. It's horrendous. Like, I've been, you know, spouting off about it for the last 20 years. It's almost worse now, opportunity wise. And to be honest, it's getting harder because obviously now all the other countries youth systems and, you know, development systems are all getting stronger. So it's even harder now to break in as, you know, foreign players and stuff. But yeah, that's the reality. And that's why, that is the reason why that a lot of players are just, you know, just trying to find an opportunity anywhere, really.
How have you and the sort of Canada bunch and treaty, how has life treated you though in Limerick? Because it's a complete different contrast probably to being in Canada.
Well, and even funnier is that the Canadians were staying down in Ula and Tipperary, so they were in like full blown like rural Ireland. So I mean, I think it was. I mean, they loved it. Like they became. I think the whole village they were living in was just absolutely mystified how these, you know, Canadian athletes are, you know, and they'd be sending me videos of being at the bar and the guys they were talking to, or like showing them of their like cow or calves being born back at the farm, like live streaming. And like I told them they should start a YouTube channel because I just getting the text messages, it was the funniest thing. But yeah, it's obviously a different world, but I think that's, even for me, like all the places I've gotten to play, like that's what it's all about, like different experiences, opening your mind to just seeing things other places and the way that they're done. So yeah, I think they've all, myself included, had I probably have, obviously my parents are from Ireland and I have loads of cousins and I've been over here tons and tons of times. But yeah, even for me, to be honest, living here now, it's great. I love it. And yeah, I mean, Ireland's a great place to be for sure.
So 12 months on from the nucleus of this idea, you're looking at a new future in Limerick, medium to long term, new investment. Tell us a bit about maybe who are the investors and what kind of they're bringing to the table. Tricor Pacific Capital is the official name of the business, but tell us a bit about why they're getting involved and what you're hoping to achieve with this kind of new lease of I suppose support for the club.
Yeah, like it's quite funny because it's Tricor Pacific Capital was not looking for a soccer team to invest in. I'm actually really good friends with the son of the owner of Tricor. It was essentially, I think, like I kind of planted. Well, I guess when I got to Treaty, I sort of saw that there was a need. You know, just again, very volunteer run, and the volunteers and what the club has built in the last 3 years is unbelievable. And like, I'm still blown away with just the quality of just people down like in Treaty all around the club. Honestly, like it is really, truly, it's the best part of soccer in the sense of like what they've done and how they've come together as a community and built something. When I got down here in, you know, February, March, I could see though that it was kind of, even with me bringing the Canadian girls over, it was like we were making the team competitive, and it wasn't like, you know, it was almost like plugging a hole as opposed to, you know, taking it anywhere. So that was kind of, I had asked the board, you know, would they be open if I found investors? And then I, you know, reached out, my friend Riley, we're from Vancouver, both of us, but we didn't meet till we got to college. We both went to Yale together, and he ended up marrying his wife. Riley went to UCC and to med school there and married his wife. So she's from Cork. Anyway, so I had spoken to Riley about it, and anyways, we went and talked to his dad, and I mean, it's not their normal investment at all. Like, and you know, he kind of, I think, was almost like humoring us with like, you know, taking the meeting initially. Like it was kind of like, guys, like this is nice, but this is so not what we invest in, or he's like, I don't even understand the business parameters of how any of this works, you know? And then basically he went away and then ended up meeting a friend who actually is really big into soccer and who had built a club from the, like, again, to cut from volunteer to, you know, more, you know, just kind of run more like a business in Vancouver. And I think that kind of piqued his interest. And then he happened to be going to Ireland like the following week. And then it just kind of snowballed. And anyway, so then that's kind of how we got them on board. And I think it's one of those things where now they're really excited about it. But, you know, they're an unbelievable, like, honest to God, like, I mean, their whole business ethos is like investing in people, long-term investment, sustainability, you know, building something that people can be proud of, good values, like all the things, again, where it's not always a given when you're taking investment, but like, I can't speak highly enough of them as people. Like my my friend Riley's mom was actually a whistleblower at the 98 Olympics for figure skating. And basically the whole judging system in skating changed because of her. And like, but that's just, their family's amazing. And I really am pinching myself that, like I said, like the league, like Limerick, all of it, like so lucky to have a family like them involved, because they are in it for the long haul. It's not about just like making a profit or whatever. Like they want to build something special, and like that's what they do in all different sorts of sectors. And I've just lured them into the Irish soccer sector. So but yeah, they're very excited, and they'll definitely be over to Limerick for sure next year.
Is there pressure on you, considering you were the person who brought the funding in? You've been brought in as CEO of the club. Is there pressure on you, do you think, just because you've come to Treaty, you've had a positive impact, and then you're looking to take the next step? Do you think there's pressure on you maybe to see how far you can bring this project along?
Honestly, I'm so excited. Like of course, it's like with anything you do in life, and again, the kind of the bigger risks you take, the more pressure there is. But I think that's where, honest to God, I think like just having the background of just a playing career that I've had I've had a lot of scary big situations that could have been huge wipeouts. Do you know what I mean? And you kind of just learn to exist in that type of pressure. And so, to be honest, it's like my dream come true to have an opportunity, again, to take everything that I learned as a player, and to just apply it. And obviously, like my whole sort of other side of when I was playing was also like running, business in the soccer space. So just to sort of take that knowledge, take the structure that, and the business acumen that Tricor has, and then also just, again, as a player, trying to, bring it all together. I think it's really exciting.
In terms of what it will look like from the start of next season or beyond, obviously there's been an issue. Treaty don't own their own facilities in terms of the ground or training facilities. Very good base of coaching in the community is kind of a legacy of the previous regime in the county. There's a lot of kind of really good coaches. Will we see the same personnel in charge of teams? Will we see still based on the Markets Field? What's the plan in terms of training facilities? Is that kind of part of the plan, or is it all about on the field stuff in the first instance?
Listen, there's obviously coming into the situation. Even just operationally to try to just get a grasp of everything. So, I think, Markets Field's obviously that's the natural place that you'd want to play. There's a little bit of back and forth with the LEDP and the council about like who's actually going to be running it. But it's quite certain that we are definitely going to be playing out of there. So, so that's obviously the first step, is to kind of come in and have a conversation there. Again, same thing with training facilities. I think obviously long-term, you'd love to have your own training facilities, but just out of the gates, just to solidify things, it's just about building good relationships with the different entities around Limerick. Again, we'd like lots of meetings set up with people. And then from a personnel perspective, I think the main thing again is retaining, obviously I even recognize I'm coming in as an outsider, the Limerick people, like the Mary Curtins, the Tommy Barretts, the people that have been in the trenches for lots and lots of years. I think obviously like they've done amazing things, with, again, not a lot of times. So I think obviously deferring to their experience and their knowledge of Limerick and Limerick soccer, and then just honestly taking the next few weeks just to kind of like, again, I'm really big on, like getting feedback and hearing what people's experiences are. And so, I think in terms of from a personnel perspective, it'll kind of be, just more of like a measured approach. Obviously, again, it's a tight turnaround to next season, but I think we are going to take a window and just kind of try to evaluate and listen to what people have to say, and then sort of make decisions from there.
To be fair, Tommy Barrett pulled a team together in about 4 days when they were created. So 4 months, I'm sure he'd be quite happy with that kind of time frame to put a side together for next year.
Yeah, and he's really an incredible person, and he works in the community, and obviously you can see like I guess even watching, I was at the game yesterday watching them play Galway, and what he's able to pull a competitive team together against full-time teams and stuff is really impressive. So yeah, lots of good people down there.
In terms of we speak a lot about the women's side of things, but just even on the men's side, I assume that ambition has to be to get a sustainable Premier Division side, even on the men's side. And we look at the women's sections, the way there's potential league expansions as well, is to make sure that Treaty's extremely competitive on both fronts, and not necessarily lagging up on the table. I assume that's a high priority.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it's going at things from a long-term perspective. I think, the first thing coming in as sort of an experienced professional player and seeing that like all the teams are only training twice a week. Like the last time that I trained twice a week was 11 years old as like a rec soccer player. And I'm not even saying that facetiously, it's the truth. So, I mean, I think right there, I look at, there's girls playing internationally underage, in our club that, you just think, wow, like if those girls were actually training 4 or 5 times a week, like if they're already doing so well training twice a week, like from that perspective, I think there's like huge growth potential in just sort of like professionalizing the academy and even up to the senior teams as well. So I think, that's a kind of thing where, initially where can you kind of get the most bang, for the situation. I think, upping the training time and just investing into all the things that come with training more. And then, I think from there, then you start to then build a base of players that are coming out of Limerick, and you also make the senior teams be places that the players want to play. So, you look at the amount of players from Limerick playing for other clubs and stuff like I think the goal would be to retain the talent like in Limerick, and then, obviously layer in that talent with maybe people like a few players from outside. So, I mean, yeah, I think the goal is to create something again long-term and sustainable, and to really focus in on, just professionalizing, like not even in pay necessarily immediately, but just in terms of like environment.
One of my bugbears over recent seasons in the League of Ireland for the men and the women is probably the lack of investment in off the field stuff. Probably key personnel in terms of admin staff, the kind of the commercial side of it, really delivering properly to a level that's acceptable to a commercial partner. Is that something we can expect to see as part of this, or will it again be focused on the pitch?
No, absolutely. Like I'm full-time, and there'll be another couple people that are full-time, and then more people that are part-time. So that's absolutely, and like I said, like you look at what Treaty's pulled together with volunteers, it's honest to God, like so unbelievably impressive. So you kind of think about taking that base now and layering it on with full-time people. And obviously, like, if that side doesn't take off, then it's 100% on my shoulders. So, so from that perspective, I completely agree with you. But that's, again, I think it's part of sort of like professionalizing the league and, soccer in Ireland as a whole. And, again, those things don't happen overnight, but as a player, kind of being away from Ireland for the last 10 years and coming back in, like I've been super impressed with the way that the league's been marketed. And a lot of times I think as a female player, you hear like lots of lip service to, oh, we're equal women, blah, blah, blah. But, I can honestly say you feel that like respect, or at least that effort to be equal on the women's side. And like I said, it just was a given for a long time. So I think it's just, again, kind of increasing that and just continuing to build and grow. But I mean, again, look at the 37,000 people watching the Irish women play in the Aviva a couple of weeks ago. The game's heading in a good direction. So I think it's exciting to be in a position to be able to continue that growth.
A bit of a two-pronged question. First part, what culture do you want the people to see that you're setting for Treaty as a whole, as a club going forward? And when you look at clubs, especially in the women's section, like Peamount United, that must inspire you, considering they have a very, very low budget they haven't got the best of facilities, but they're still able to create some of the best players in the country and still win national leagues.
Yeah, I mean, so in terms of like myself and what I'm about, like I think for me the biggest thing is like I want to create an environment that like people walk away like they want to come to because it's super positive. You giving them every tool to be the best that they can possibly be, treating people properly, like just setting high standards, setting values and living by them. But I just think ultimately, at the end of the day, like in life in general, like what's the point of doing things if you're not enjoying it? So that's, I think for me, the first thing. And then, I think Piedmont's a perfect example of like, you build a community, you build values, structures, an environment. And those things are like, they override, absolutely. They override funds, like that's the base you have to build things on. And that's what championships are built on, so I think it's great. It's really, again, huge congratulations to Piedmont for winning the league and again, being like a great example to show that those are the things that really do matter.
You talked about equality, and I suppose coming from the American collegiate system, Title IX, obviously, as our listeners might not be aware, but it requires institutions to put the same amount of investment into women's sports as men's sports, and it really does create a lot of opportunities for females in sport across the entire country. Will we see a 50-50 split, given your own background, in terms of where the focus goes, or will there be a split one way or the other next year, or have you even got to that stage yet?
Listen, for me, 100%, that's how I want it to be. I think, again, in sort of kind of having to just take things step by step. I think obviously, you're coming into the women having no budget and the men having like a significant budget, relatively speaking. So, this year, I don't think it'll be 50-50, but that's absolutely, again, in terms of, I mean, that's how it should be, in my opinion, in terms of, again, like just equal investment. I mean, I guess there's lots of different ways that you can take that, but I think, I think we're in a situation, at least in treaty, that the budgets are low enough that is a realistic goal. So, it's not about taking away from the men either. Like, it's about building up both. And again, it's going to be a slow build, but I'd like to have, your ideal situation would be to have the men and the women be professional and everyone's getting paid well and whatever. But I think that the things, honestly, again, important to me is like, from an equality standpoint, it's not even necessarily just about like salary. It's also like, how are you marketed? Is it truly like equal on social media? What you're doing for the men as for the women? Are the, the staffing, is that the same? Is the just the environment around it in terms of the sort of like strength and conditioning and those things, are they the same? Like those are things that, those are kind of controllables, I think, from the start, that, again, training times, is it the same? So those are the sorts of things, I think, for me, just to build that sort of foundation where it's not like, the boys are getting this and the girls are getting something like lower, or, I think that's apart from a controllable coming in, and how I think that's how it should be personally. Again, that everyone's, given the environment to flourish in, and it's not one or the other. We're like a club and a team, and we're all about, building each other up. So I think, for sure, equality is a core value of mine, and just, again, even more so than that, giving everybody the tools to flourish. So, so that is, I think that could be something that, you could expect from sort of our ethos as a club.
On the field at the minute, this year's probably been the first year in a while from a treaty viewpoint where mid-season you've been able to attract players of good caliber from other clubs. That gives you a good base to start with. Have you started to have these conversations with, say, some of the players you brought in from abroad, some of the players that have done well for you? And when do you sort of start this whole building of the team for next year? Have you started to have conversations yet with the management side of things, or is that as soon as the season finishes?
Yeah, again, it's been like an absolute whirlwind, in the sense that, like, not even knowing for sure that this was happening, even in the last couple, it just kind of seemed like it was getting over the line. But I mean, it's been a long few months of trying to put this all together. So, so in terms of like, again, you hope that kind of the word gets out in terms of, what we're trying to build, and that it is going to be, from a resources and that type of perspective and training and all that stuff, that it's going to be different for next season. But obviously also too, you need to respect that players are playing on teams right now, and like, it's not my style to, be sort of disrespecting other teams and reaching out to players. But I mean, I think for sure, like the turnaround time is quite quick, but at this point, honestly, we're just getting our feet settled and just trying to, there's a lot of things going on besides on the field as well that we have to make sure in place for the club to run properly. So it'll be a hectic few weeks, but I imagine, like, getting into November, we'll probably start thinking more about that side of things.
Just one follow-up on that. Does this mean now, because of the new role, that Ciara McCormack stays on the pitch are done, or could we still see you lining out in the treaty colours?
I feel like my work wife, Mary Curtin, would be, there's only one answer that I feel like is acceptable to her, but I mean, I don't know. I beat to my own drum. So I don't know. I mean, listen, I haven't really gotten to play that much the last few months, obviously, because of all of this. And it's actually quite funny, because I think my teammates that, like, I kind of disappeared and it probably, like, makes sense now, like, like Jack in the Box or whatever. Like this is where I was. So I don't know. I mean, I love to play. I'll be at practice if Mary doesn't allow me to play. I don't know. We'll see. It's like I said, it's all really fresh and new. And to be honest, like obviously I'm going to put whatever's best for the club first. And so if that's not playing anymore, then that's not playing anymore. But I'm sure I'll be a regular at practice, even if I'm not actually on the team.
I think with an answer like that, you probably need to go into politics. You didn't actually answer the question, but I think we get the idea. Listen, Ciara, congratulations on all the exciting news coming out of the club, both in terms of the club's future, but also in terms of your own. It's great to see around the league people with your experience and your expertise coming in, and the investment that's coming into our games, particularly in the female side. Obviously, we're big fans of that here on the show. So thanks for joining us, and the very, very best of luck for, I suppose, the next 3 or 4 months when the real serious work kind of gets going and you get your feet under the desk properly.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, and all the great work you guys are doing too.
Perfect. Thanks a million, Ciara.
Okay, bye.
Ciara McCormack there. It's phenomenal. It's great to see that kind of level of support coming into teams in the league. Your thoughts? It's got to be positive for both the club and the league in general.
There's so much that we probably don't know that she's trying to do as well in the background, that she's trying to bring on even further. But it's the simple things to me that she spoke about when she talked about like the equality. For me, it's not all about money. I've said it all along. Money only gets you so far, and we've seen that in the league this year. But like when you look at, for me, things like the simple things like social media coverage across things, simple little things, and she talked so much about what can be controlled and how they can control. That's the sort of impression that leaves a lasting impression, and I think she's someone who's going to get down, get stuck into the job for Treaty. And I think not just the women will benefit, but I think the men will benefit massively from what she wants to do. The only thing, and we probably didn't mention this as much with her, but it'd be interesting to see how, coming from someone who's a soccer mad, how she taps into that the local Limerick sporting hold. Can she get Treaty to get a bit of a big uphold? And there's no doubt with the Limerick hurlers doing so well, Munster being based in Limerick, how can they grow their fan base? It's positive. Everything is positive, and there's so much that is going on. I'm just really keen to see how Ciara gets on and what Ciara does with them in the next couple of months and into the next season. The only thing I will say is, and this is for listeners, if you're a fan of Treaty United, please don't just jump the gun if the men or women don't make massive strides in the next 6 to 8 months. The thing is, she's talking about it being a process and talking about it long term. For me, that's the most important thing, that it's not about what we're going to do short term. It's about what they're going to do long term. Ideally, I would like to see them tie Alvin Heise up as well and say, listen, Alvin, we want you there next year, because that was one thing that sort of struggled when it comes to Treaty in the last number of years, is management turnovers. You look, the players have gone out the window, like Amy Madden, Michaela Lawrence at Wexford, Nicole Nix, some of the youngsters who've constantly gone out the door, and hopefully they can keep them sort of players and build in the next couple of years. But it's all positive. It was interesting to hear what Ciara had to say, but I think it's a great personality to have in the league, no doubt.
Yeah, of course, we didn't really talk about the specific numbers involved. That's kind of fairly private information, I'm sure. But at the same time, it's positive to hear them talking about professional contracts, semi-professional contracts, even if that's not in the short term. We need to see more teams doing that. Now, there's pros and cons to that kind of big investor coming in and kind of bankrolling things. I think there's a certain nice mix you can get between the volunteer and the professional staff off the pitch that kind of run the club. And I think sometimes the professional investment, or those kind of serious investors, sometimes dilute that volunteerism that can cause a huge expense for clubs. But I think it's a pitfall, or there's pitfalls and pathways through this. I think there's no better person to take care of that. Let's maybe go back and take a look at some of the action over the weekend. Of course, there was 4 games. We kind of touched on the Treaty game with Ciara, so we mightn't focus on that too much. But let's talk about, before we get into the Cup semi-finals, Peamount have won the league. They've won it on the head-to-head rule, effectively, in that they can only be matched by Shamrock Rovers. 4 games left for Rovers, 12 points in the difference. And even if they were to win all 12 and Peamount dropped their points, Peamount would still win on the head-to-head. So they've won it, despite maybe not looking like they've won it mathematically. It is done and dusted. They will lift the cup, I believe, against Sligo Rovers in their last game. It's nice from a Peamount point of view that they've that done and dusted and put to bed, and they've won the league, and they've won it in a really impressive fashion.
They've won it with kids. Like we talked during the summer when Kate Mooney left to go to Lewis, where were the goals going to come from? Like you look at young Ellen Doolin, I think she must have scored. I think that's her fourth league goal. She scored twice Saturday, just with Cheryl in the middle of the park. There's no doubt about it. The one thing you will say is James O'Callaghan as manager of the year, wrapped up, signed, sealed, delivered. If anybody else is even, you can't for what they have done this year. It's just been magic, and like they've only dropped points in 2 games. That was the 4-1 defeat against Shelbourne, where they were 1-0 up at home. Then Shells hit them in a 10-15 minute spell in the second half. The only other point they dropped is the 2 points against Rovers, where they should have beaten Rovers that day in PRL Park. Amanda Wooden made multiple great saves, including the penalty from Karen Duggan. Like it's just been ultimate consistency. I think that's 10 wins on the bounce in the league. Like,
but I think it's stunning how I know we've kind of talked them up all year because they've surprised us. Let's be honest. We didn't really give them a chance of being league title contenders at the start of the year. I thought they'd struggle. I thought they'd still finish top 3 or 4, but I didn't think they'd be in the running for the league title.
I thought they'd be there or thereabouts, but they'd come up short.
Yeah.
I didn't think they'd be like when we look at the squad, because I remember looking at I won't name the outlet, but you've probably seen the thing going around on social media where someone's saying the Peamount Dynasty's finished at the start of the season, and Peamount players have jumped all over that. That's probably written up on that picture's probably up on the wall in the dressing room. Knowing James O'Callaghan, and like the one thing James has been right when he said it to me earlier a couple of weeks ago when I was chatting to him. He said, "I hope people give us credit for what we've done." The thing is, to me, this is the best performance to win a National League. It's probably the strongest National League in terms of the win when you add Rovers into it. To have only dropped points in 2 games, to have only dropped 5 points out of 18 games is absolutely phenomenal. And like I said last week, I thought Wexford might have got a result against them. Got a draw against them. But like you look at the game was going 60 minutes, and then all of a sudden, Peamount just step on the gas again, and then they get the 2 late goals, and then once they get one, you think, okay, signs they'll deliver, and then Dolan pops up again, and you're sort of thinking. But you look at players like Karen Duggan, Nevry Burke, like the 2 players for me that probably deserve a lot of the credit, but they won't get as much of the credit as say Karen Duggan or Saif Doyle. It's Jeddah Barrell and Chloe Maloney. Yeah. Centre back. Jeddah Barrell played on the wing
I'm not gonna lie, I did have to get an eye test when I saw her playing early in the season. I think it was against Sligo Rovers. She was playing centre back. I thought she was just filling a gap. But if she was, she's literally filled that gap all season. She's been absolutely phenomenal as a converted winger to go back into centre half and do as well as she has. Very, very impressive from her.
And Chloe Maloney as well. Chloe Maloney's the sort of person that when she could have easily dropped out of the National League a couple of years ago on the bench a lot for Peamount, wasn't getting much of a look in. Went to Galway, had a bit of a spell with Galway. Then Claire Walsh, Stella Doherty leave, and she gets the call to go back to Peamount. Goes back in, plays a little bit towards the end of that season, and then the next season sort of plays a lot of games. She could easily have gone and sailed off and played Gaelic football. Like she got to the intermediate All-Ireland final this year with Clare. Could easily have just went, I'm just going to concentrate on Gaelic football. But what a rejuvenation! What a season she's had. She's been unbelievable for them. And like the thing about it is that there's times where you've looked at Peamount, you're thinking, oh no, they're going to drop points here. They're not going to do this. Like I've gone back to, and I've said on this show 3 times already, maybe 4 times since we've come back off the World Cup break. That game against Bows is just epitomizes everything that Peamount have done this year. Late goal, Derval Byrne, superb finish, but it was the character, the never die attitude for me that's sort of what's impressed me the most. And I saw a picture on social media yesterday and made me smile. The picture of Lauren and James, because remember we had Lauren on the show earlier in the year, and she must have got a lot of stick when she was on before the Shells game, and then they lost the Shells game. But like to see players like that, you know, like Tara O'Hanlon hasn't played in weeks, injured. Like they've lost big players, and they just seem to just keep going. And
well, let's take a look at the players who have played for them this year, courtesy of our website, finewhistle.ie. You get all this information. Karen Duggan has played 22 games. Lorna Callahan ever present as well. Chloe Maloney's been involved in every game this year. This includes obviously the Avenir Cup games as well. And I think there's another game in there too. 22
FAI
games.
Cup.
Yeah, that'll be right. But you can see yourself the quality of the players coming through there, like Jess Fitzgerald, still underage.
For me, she's probably right up there when it comes to Young Player of the Year this year. And I wouldn't be surprised if Piedmont have a clean sweep in Player of the Year, Manager of the Year, and Young Player of the Year this year. I wouldn't be at all surprised if they have a clean sweep in 3 of them. And if they do, you can't turn around and say they don't deserve it.
Very hard to look past Karen Duggan, and I normally wouldn't pick players out this early for an individual award, but I think
can't go past Karen. Yeah, but the thing is, she won it a couple of years ago. Then you sort of look at last year, Emily Corbett winning it, and then, like, for me, the statement that go the moment that you knew how much Karen Duggan wanted this was when she put that tweet out last year to say, "I'm staying."
Yeah.
That's how much you knew Piedmont United means to Karen Duggan. I think there's a great photograph on the league's social media account where hugging her mother after the game yesterday, and you can see how much it means from her. Like, you look at, I think, what's that, Nemo's fifth National League title. You know, there's players like that. Like, we haven't really talked about Neve Burke this year, but yeah, Piedmont have been ultra consistent, and like, from an entire squad, from a management, like James O'Callaghan lost Vinnie Patterson at the end of last season. Vinnie going in to take a role in men's football in the Leinster Senior League, brings in Brian O'Sullivan, who'd coached at League of Ireland level, managed Wexford in the League of Ireland, brought him in as an assistant manager. And like, the one thing that everybody said to me this year every time I spoke to someone in Piedmont is, we're fitter, we're so up for it. And like, I just think they deserve all the credit they're getting, and all the accolades, because, like, I know everybody's talking about Piedmont. They want to go down the route of a League of Ireland clubs only, but what Piedmont have added to women's football is absolutely remarkable, and continue to add to is absolutely remarkable.
We've spoken about this at length on the show before. I'm not going to get dragged into it today, but I agree with you. There's a certain amount of risk when the women's game goes in under the League of Ireland. It becomes another addition rather than the main focus of the club. I love that Piedmont have maintained that. I don't know how long they're going to be able to continue to maintain it. We talked about it last week. Let's take a quick look at the league table. Of course, this is not the final league table. Still a couple of weeks to go in the competition, but you can see there Piedmont United secure top spot. They have 12 points on Shamrock Rovers, as we mentioned, with 4 games to go, but will win it on the head-to-head. If the absolute bottom fell out of their season, they would still grab that league title. So they'll be awarded that in their last home game against Sligo Rovers. But at the other end of the table, I know we talked about it Treaty, but great to see Cork get a win. I think it's important that we don't see teams not get those little victories through the season as well. It's disappointing if you see a team that didn't beat anybody all year. For Cork, it's a big result for them. I'm not sure how much it's going to change in terms of their attention for next year, but it's key for them to keep winning, just to keep them in touch in some way, because that's very tight now between those 3 teams at the bottom.
Yeah, it's been a bit of a horrible season for Cork. We probably expected a lot more from them. But like, the thing about Cork, and like, when you look at Cork, is the amount of young players they've tried this year, the amount of players they've given opportunities to. Like, we've seen Eve Mangan, captain in Cork, 18, 19. I think, well, we said it before, Ciara McCormack is probably their oldest player, 23, 24, and like, they're probably one of the youngest average age squads in the league alongside Treaty, and they've constantly have players in underage international squads as well. So like, they've been able to keep them players, and like, realistically, with this season always going to be difficult for them. I think if they can take a step on in terms of the learnings that they would have taken from that season, there's no doubt about it. They'll be a stronger team. They probably feel last week against Sligo, maybe they left that one behind with the second half performance when they get level so early into the second half, that they didn't go on and win it. But like, glad to see they're not going to finish with a 0 in the W column. I think that is important as well. And could they get another one before the end of the season? It'd be difficult.
That was my next question, because there's a couple of interesting, like the league title is done, and there's no relegation obviously to speak of, but there are some interesting little contests within the league table in those kind of tiers we talk about from time to time. The race for second is going to be interesting. Shamrock Rovers ahead by a nose, possibly with that extra game in hand at the moment on Shells, but that's going to be an interesting battle over the next couple of weeks. For me, that mid-table fourth place spot up for grabs between maybe those four sides, Galway, Bows, Wexford and Athlone, who again have a game or two in hand. It's going to be interesting to see how that pans out in the last 4 weeks of the season. And then at the bottom, there is bragging rights and I suppose trying to avoid that wooden spoon at the bottom. If Cork can get a result, will Treaty or Sligo manage to stay ahead of them? Who's going to finish in that 9th place as well? I think they're kind of little small targets for these teams to really target over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, but it's that's the thing, and we've had so many conversations about different types of battles and different types of things, and I think Sligo still have DLR to play. They have a difficult trip against Shells this midweek. We spoke at length about it. As much as I detest the idea of bringing a club from the west of Ireland all the way up to Dublin for a league game, like I'd suspect Sligo would probably have the harder of the running of the teams. But like if you look at, say, for example, the likes of an Athlone, while Athlone would probably like to finish as high as they can, I'd say a lot of priority for them is probably on, can they avoid injuries up until for the next couple of weeks, make sure they don't miss anybody for the cup final, because there's no doubt that they're going to have revenge on their mind when it comes to Shells from last year's cup final and what happened in Tallaght. Like there's so many permutations. Will managers give players a try? I'd be very interested to see what James O'Callaghan's going to do in the last 2 games, because away to Galway, he might play some players in that away to Galway game. Then the last day of the season, at home to Sligo, you're going to get the trophy at home. What are you going to do? You're going to go full strength, or are you going to bring players, sort of role players on? And because
I want to win those 2 games. I think the statement they've put out this year in terms of their performances, they're going to want hit as many points as possible, and they'll be looking at that 55 points out of 60 and going, we think we can get that. They may, particularly in the Sligo game, maybe when it's a bit of a party atmosphere, the league will be wrapped up. They know the presentation's happening. There's no real pressure. There's no jeopardy on the game. They'll start a strong team and try and kill that game off, and then make a few changes if they manage to get a lead, maybe at halftime or early in the second half. But I think even though the league title wrapped up, they'll still want to get that points total up as high as possible.
But could you imagine though if Peamount finished with 55 points, considering the opposition they've had in that league this year? It'd be absolutely meant, and it got down. It has to go, for me. If they finish with 55 points, it has to go on the best ever Women's National League title.
I'd agree with that 100%.
And considering, and I've said this on record, 2021 is probably going to go down as one of the biggest slip-ups in football, in Irish football history. And they've wrote that wrong. There's no doubt 2021 hurt, because I know from speaking to James, it hurt, and I know from speaking to him when they lost the first cup final against Wexford in the Aviva, how that hurt as well. And I think the character is probably the one thing that you can't stress enough of Peamount United as a club.
We will hopefully have a chat with James later in the week. We have plans to maybe do another episode later in the week after the midweek games to have a chat with James about the season so far. We've purposely not had him on because we didn't want to put any pressure on until it was done and dusted. The Cup semi-finals, of course, last weekend. We've touched again on that final between Shells and Athlone. It's a repeat of last year's final. We did highlight at the top of the show kind of the way the games went yesterday. But you were at the Shells game. I was at the Sligo Athlone game. Talk us through the game in Tallaght and where Shells won it, basically.
Shells won it in defence. They limited Shamrock Rovers to minimal chances from distance. Amanda McQuillan made only really had to make 1 or 2 decent saves. I thought Libby Moore in midfield for Shells was very, very good. Started ahead of Alex Kavanagh, broke the game up completely. They started Hannah Healy in a more advanced position, and Hannah just tormented Shamrock Rovers all day. And like from a Shells viewpoint, they probably go in at halftime 0-0, a little bit disappointed. Probably had the better of the chances, and then not long after the break, Megan Smith-Lynch corners punched away by Amanda Budden. It's not properly cleared. Comes out to Kerry Letman, who gives it back to Megan again, and she finds Christy Gray at the far post, and her header back across goal, and you could see once that went in, you sort of thought, like at half time, I was saying to people, it's either going to be a 1-0 Shells win or we're going all the way. I didn't see Rovers scoring, and I thought Rovers were the team who were making the mistakes compared to last week. Whereas if you look at last week, the game was sort of dead and buried after that 10 or 15 minute mistake, where there's a couple of mistakes from Shells and they get punished a couple of times. Whereas this time Shells were a lot more switched on. You could see how alert they were. Like I spoke to Pearl Slattery after the game, and Pearl sort of said, like, they put last week behind them. They knew it's a different performance. It's all about this week. It's all about what they need to do now, and like they just didn't let Rovers back into it. The second goal is a calamity. It's a long ball push forward, and Amanda Budden gives it to Shauna Fox. Fox tries to give it back to Budden again, but Fox completely underhits the pass, and Hannah Healy's there that says thank you, robs the ball and fires into an empty net, and she starts celebrating as soon as she hit the ball. She knew it was in, and that was all she wrote. Like Rovers really disappointed me in terms of going forward. I thought they didn't really offer an awful lot going forward. Second half they were poor, and like Shells were full value for the win. Collie O'Neill have to go back to the drawing board to lose the league on the same day and then be knocked out of the cup. It's a bit of a double whammy, but Shells were full value for the win. Shells fans never stopped singing. They really drove the team on at times when they needed the extra bit of push, and like Shells are really good on the day. Probably for me, it's probably their best performance of the season.
I think down in Sligo, it was probably what you generally expected coming in as a neutral to the game. Athlone obviously have a better record, cup finalists last year, probably better form this season. And they've been in fine form over recent weeks as well. And they kind of brought that in. They were the stronger side pretty much from the off. Sligo did compete with them pretty well for the opening maybe 10 or 15 minutes. They weren't outplayed for the first 25, 30 minutes of the game. There was chances at either end, but Athlone probably had the stronger opportunities. The American influence there just ripped Sligo apart at will when they ran at them. I was very impressed with Bonnie McKiernan in goals. I thought she came out, she commanded her area very well. There was a mistake later on for the third goal. Didn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. The game was already gone at that stage. But she did really, really well. And she's a young player. She's only 17, maybe 18.
We've talked about her a couple of times this season about putting in big performances for Sligo Rovers, and I'm not surprised to hear you say it. I've only caught clips of the game, but like considering how good she's been, like I think the Bows performance, the first, I think it was the league performance in Dalymount where they lost 1-0. I thought she was brilliant that day as well, and like she's a bright future if she can keep going.
Yeah, there was a couple of really good individual duels as well in different places around the pitch. Leah Kelly and Madison Gibson had a good battle for most of the game until Kelly went off late in the game. But I think they both picked up bookings at one stage for little niggly challenges on each other. But Gibson probably shaded that battle, but Kelly was definitely in there for the fight. Emma Hansbury, what can you not say about Emma Hansbury as well? She does the simple things so well. She probably doesn't have the legs anymore to get up and down the pitch like she would have done 8 or 10 years ago. But what she does bring now is that just the brains, just these little touches, just to get the ball away from an opposing player and into space for one of her teammates to run onto. And she really does pull the strings for Sligo. When she's on form, Sligo have a chance in games.
It's an awful shame we didn't get to see her in a Sligo jersey 5 years ago.
Yeah, 100%. And I think she probably would regret that as well. But I suppose this is the way the cookie crumbles sometimes. But Sligo, they're definitely better now than they were at the start of the season. There's some really impressive performances there. But in terms of the game, Athlone never really looked like losing this. They got a somewhat dubious penalty. I felt in real time it was a penalty. She took a touch. Can't remember quite off the top of my head. I think it was Lauren Carabin. Took a touch away from goal. And Leah Kelly came in and she just took her out of it just on the corner of the box. So she was standing in the box. The ball had almost left. And by the time Carabin fell over, she was outside the box. Leah Kelly herself was outside the box. But the foul actually just took place on the corner. I think it was a correct decision by the referee. Plenty of debate about it, both during and after the game from Sligo's point of view. They felt it wasn't. They're always going to kind of feel that way. Like the local bias is always going to kick in a little bit. I'm pretty sure the referee got the right decision. Phenomenal finish from Madison Gibson for the penalty. She buried it, gave Bonnie McKiernan absolutely no chance. And then a deflected goal moments later off another impressive player who I thought did really, really well for Sligo, Emer Lafferty. She's come into them in the last few months, but she got a block on it, but all it did was just knock it over the head of McKiernan and into the back of the net. And from there on in, there was never, ever going to be any other winner other than Athlone Town. That mistake we talked about, McKiernan just kind of went up, caught a ball, it bounced off her hands and just fell to the head of Jessie Osmond, who will never get an easier goal. She nodded home from about 6 inches.
We're hearing an awful lot about her in the last couple of weeks, and
she's very good.
I hate mentioning this person's name because I do it every single show. But Ken Kiernan is always tweeting about players, and I'm always looking at his tweets. And he said after she scored her first goal, watch her. She's gonna be a quality player. And so like you're keeping an eye on these star players, but like that's not more youngster and more player and more like I'm gonna throw you on the spot here. Can Athlone get revenge against Shells in the cup final?
If they play as well as they did yesterday, they can. Now it's going to need a lift. They will probably need to be as good, if not better, to take Shells on next week. I don't think Athlone are as strong this year as they were last year. I think they've lost a couple of key players in certain places, particularly maybe in defence. But I think if they show up, Katie Keane is an addition to them in goals. Didn't have a whole pile to do yesterday, but anything she had to do, she did really, really well. Roisin Malloy scored a goal 15 minutes from time, and Sligo native, she's from just outside the town, played underage for Sligo. Myrne Devaney, another former Sligo player, won the county championship in Leitrim with Glencar Manor Hamilton yesterday afternoon, scored the winning goal, came on at half time, scored 1-3, went and played the FAI Cup semi-final that evening. And
I don't like that.
I'm just telling you the facts.
I know of another player in Dublin who went to play in an FAI Cup semi, played 90 minutes in an FAI Cup semi-final last year, and then went and played an intermediate club championship game in Dublin, club championship final in Dublin that night. I think it's at that sort of level, like she'd be the sort of player for me I'd expect to be starting an Athlone team and sort of driving Athlone on. And like we talked a little bit last week about the Soft Oil incident. If they had been playing someone else and the nose ring had had an impact on that. I just think at such a big.
You mentioned that, and I won't mention names to protect the guilty, but one player was coming off the pitch last night after the game. We were doing some interviews. You can catch them on our YouTube channel with Kieran Kilduff was there, and also with some of the Sligo folk as well. Steve Feeney gave us his thoughts after the game. But there was a player came off the pitch. I won't even say what team she was with, and all she did was someone mentioned her nose ring, and she put her finger to her nose and goes, "Oh my God, I forgot to take that out." So the double standards in refereeing, the referee had a good game yesterday, but for a player to come off the pitch 2 or 3 weeks after that incident happened with Pease, it's a little bit, I don't know what I'm looking for, but just unbalanced, imbalanced. And
100%.
It should be one rule and implied the same way across the board. In terms of the final, though, it's going to be mouth-watering. I think Athlone are going to bring a big crowd with them. They had a really good crowd in Sligo last night. Given that it was basically a choice, if you're traveling to that game, it was basically a choice between that and the rugby. And, of course, the whole country wanted to watch the rugby.
Unless you stop in a pub, unless you decide to stop in a pub in Sligo and watch it.
But even then, not comfortable. So
no, there's a toss of a coin or a draw to be made. I think it's Monday or Tuesday to decide who's going to be the home team in the cup final. And once that happens, then what I'd say to people is keep an eye on their club social medias, because if they want tickets in the Shells or they want tickets in the Athlone, and they'll start to come out on sale midway through next week. But to be honest with you, we need to sell talent out for the cup final.
It's going to be a massive game. I think there's a really, really good potential of getting a good crowd in there. Shells have had a good following all year. The men's supporters have really come on board in the last 12 months. And I think I'd love to see 5,000-6,000 people in Tala. I think it's doable.
5.5 last year.
Yeah, I think it's doable to really probably get close to a sellout, if not sell it out. But it should be a phenomenal game, and really looking forward to what it might bring.
Absolutely, I can't wait.
We are hoping, we're going to wrap it up there, but we're going to hope to have James Callahan on. We haven't nailed down the exact details yet, but we will let you know ahead of it. But we'll be going through everything, a review of the season with the Peamount boss, the title-winning boss, his second title with the club, and he'll be quite happy.
Incorrect. Third title with the club.
Apologies, James. I'm sure I'll hear about that one later on in the week. Listen, thanks to Ciara McCormack. Really exciting times for everybody in the Midwest, and particularly at Treaty United in terms of what...
Breifne, just before we finish, don't forget, just to mention the fixtures for the midweek fixtures this week.
Yep, we have 3 games on Wednesday afternoon. DLR Waves host Shamrock Rovers, Galway United host Athlone Town, and Sligo Rovers traversing the country on a Wednesday afternoon. Not happy about that in the showgrounds last Saturday night after their defeat. I spoke to them. They really weren't happy about having to go to Shells on Wednesday night. It's a day out of their lives. But listen, it is the sacrifices people have to make when they play in a professional league, but it needs to be looked at. It's not really the best situation for anybody, but there are the fixtures. All those games 7:45, all live on LOI TV. You can follow with updates as well on finalwhistle.ie. That's us for this week. We'll be back later in the week with a conversation with James O'Callaghan. We'll let you know the details, but talk to you then. Cheers.